Hello, Straight Talk audience. This is AI Gonzalo Lira, and this is Straight Talk, Cyber Cafe Edition.
Hey, what's up, guys? I am live here from Tbilisi with Mad Max from Liberty Rising Report, and today we're going to be discussing the Trump putting peace deal in Alaska, AI, and economic uncertainty with the situation with oil at $60 a barrel. So, if you will, go ahead and take it away, Adam.
Thanks. So energy, AI, and a potential peace, or at least peace negotiations between the great Russia and America in Alaska, which used to be Russian America. That's what we're going to be talking about on this August 2025. The Wednesday before the Friday, where Trump is saying everything counts. Trump has just put out a statement saying there's going to be severe consequences if Putin doesn't surrender, concede, or if he doesn't agree to a peace deal to end the war from Friday. Now, I think this is highly unrealistic. I don't anticipate in a couple days Putin will say, all right, fighting stopped. I do believe, or at least I'm hopeful, that some things will be agreed upon, because this conflict going on right now is not just about territory in Ukraine. That's how it's manifested, but it's a symptom of the wider geoeconomics and great power politics. And that's really, that's what drives reality. It's not the regime of Ukraine. And one of, as we talk about often, fundamental components to how the world works is energy and banks and resources.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much like what I was talking about earlier. The Consolidated Legacy Group was about oil, and that America for the longest time had a monopoly in this sector, especially with the petrodollar. Gonzalo Lira mentioned this before his timely passing. And what he had talked about was that this petrodollar was set up, by OPEC, by Saudi Arabia, in order to control oil. And with the creation of BRICS and the fact that a lot of BRICS countries are oil producing countries, especially Russia being one of them, the certainty of oil, especially with the level of economic slowdown that's been going on for the last couple of years since basically COVID lockdowns and ongoing. It's starting to really take its toll on the global economy and global trade. And then with the multipolarism between BRICS and Western economies, it's really, we're in uncertain times, to say the least. But I remember we had talked about this several months ago, that there was possibly going to be a forced negotiated peace deal due to the economy. At the end of summer, that I had said, I also predicted that oil would be around $60 a barrel by August, by the end of summer, which is where it's at now. A lot of people are like, "Oh, oil's going to go up because of the conflict in the Middle East and Israel and all of this stuff." And I was like, no. You got to look at the dry good index shipping, consumer spending, and trade. And right now, that's just been down and down, and it's continually going down since, like I said, since before Trump took office. So a lot of this is affecting the oil prices and demand for oil. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
Anticipate a forced peace deal in terms of economic pressures. Economic pressure, resolution, but I just don't see right now. I'm happy to be proven wrong. I just don't see Putin conceding. This is an existential conflict for them, and they're winning. And they're winning pretty heavily handed currently. So I just don't see why they would concede or they would permit any concessions. The concession may be the part of Kherson on the west bank of the Dnieper River, you can keep that. And maybe, anything on the west bank of the river, you can keep that. But every territory that currently have, even they don't have in those everything on the east bank of the Dnieper River in those 4 oblasts, Russia's not going to give up until they have all of that. And looking at the battlefield right now, it's possible Russia won't give up until they've taken Odessa. If Kiev continues fighting, if America says we will continue fighting till the last Ukrainian, because it's in American interest to hurt Russia. And Russia say, how can we that as such structural adversity, a strategic adversary? You have mistreated us. You've killed. I think Mediazona. I think they're pro-Ukraine. I think they said, look, there's at least 120,000 dead Russians. That's a lot of dead people, but by all accounts, my understanding is there's over 1 million dead Ukrainians, and of which all of them are soldiers. That's kind of an 8-to-1 ratio already, which is what I've kind of been talking about throughout. And 1.1 million dead. So I don't know. Point is, Russia's not only winning decisively, winning militarily, winning numerically, but they're breaking through the line of defense, strategic line defense, almost holes getting through. So I just don't think Russia are in the mood for concessions. But they say, if we can win, we'll accept your peace. And that's what's going to happen on Friday, per my understanding. And it's broader than just Ukraine. South Caucasus, BRICS, Europe, many things will be on the table. And Putin's going to go in prepared, per my understanding of the profile of the president of Russia.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think there's already probably a negotiated peace that's probably been done in the back door. It's not so much a negotiated peace, but I think it's a trade deal that's in the works. And I think it's a trade deal that's probably going to be in the works between Iran, Russia, and the United States. That's what I think's going on. I think Trump's going to be throwing Ukraine under the bus, and he's going to force Europe's hand to basically say, "Hey, we're going to side with a negotiated peace deal with Russia, and just basically say that we're going to defund it. If Russia or Ukraine doesn't agree to it, I think Trump's probably going to try to wash his hands of it. That's what I think's going on. And I've been saying that for a while.
I hope so. It was just reported a few hours ago that Merz, the president of Germany, and Zelensky have set to the peace conditions. The borders cannot be changed through violence. We will never concede territory. Said, yeah, you're going to lose territory. It will be necessary. Sit down. You will lose territory. But again, he also said there will be very severe consequences for Russia if Putin doesn't stop the Ukraine war after Friday. I just don't see that. Unless they say, okay, Putin, you win, Ukraine is no longer under American domination or dominion, which is a hefty surrender for the Western side. We'll see. But I don't anticipate the war finishes this week. Although strategically, perhaps it's finished.
Yeah, I don't think the war's going to end this week either. But I mean, I think from what I've been hearing from the main group and other influencers, sounds like Russia's pushing pretty hard to take as much territory as they can up until this the summit, and it apparently looks like Ukraine is hitting targets within Russia. I don't like with drone strikes, so I don't know what exactly is going on, but I think the war's over. Like, to be honest, it's not being covered in the media. Nobody's really talking about it anymore, as far as I know. And I think that this is coming at a time when the world economy is at such a slowdown. Oil prices are low. Bitcoin, gold is at its highest it's ever been. I mean, then Trump's tariffs and stuff, and the embargoes and self-sanctioning that Europe's been doing. It's just we're either going to see major World War III, or there's going to be some type of concession, and we're going to go back to trading again, to a global trading situation, trade deals basically. And that's what I said would probably happen at the end of the summer. Is when I was just basically waiting to see what's going to happen with the summer, and especially here in Tbilisi, like what's going on. I mean, they're building like crazy here, and apparently rents have come down. Prices on real estate. They're starting to take concessions on that, and you can see there's a little bit of a slowdown in the building. So it's uncertainty at this point in the global economy. What's going to happen?
I'm not as optimistic. Right. I'm not as optimistic. I agree, of course, what you're saying, that the economy for most ordinary people is not doing well. Maybe for some people, if the economy is doing great for you, or if you're doing great, good for you, but the economy is not doing well. And I think that it's been Washington strategic policy to take us to this point. And they gambled and they went in heavy and they tried to defeat Russia and they failed. But this was a Washington policy. You talked about Europe's self-sanctions. It's kind of true. Certainly, the Europeans have imposed sanctions that have inflicted economic devastation upon themselves to attack Russia. Makes no sense until you recognize that actually Europe isn't leading Europe. It's not a democracy. It's more like the Soviet Union. But the bureaus, it's not even the European Commission, it's orders on high from Washington. The EU is a puppet, an unsovereign vassal of Washington. And so when the emperor says impose sanctions, really when the empire says impose sanctions on Russia, they do it. And when the empire poses or frames Russia as the enemy, as a strategic adversary, as a rival, a latent rival, declared, they all align to do that. Now, the emperor is saying, I want this war to come to an end. But who runs the empire? Is it the empire? Is it reality? Is it the emperor? Now, it appears the reality is Ukraine is going to lose this war. They've already lost. But there are more Ukrainians that can continue to throw into the meat grind. The question is, can the emperor end war in Ukraine? I mean, let's put it this way, the European factor, like the European economy, I don't know how bad the economic situation is in America. I see a lot of things, lots of people in debt, lots of struggle, high rents, high food, high everything. Recently, I saw a picture from Russia. I think it was 25 cents for 10 eggs from in the supermarket. I think it was in Moscow as well, which is amazing. Maybe that was on deal, but if I could get 10 eggs for $1, I'd be very, very happy. And we look at Europe. They import energy and export high-end AI and industrial technology. This current sanction regime forced Europe into higher input costs, weakening their competitiveness, especially against US technology and manufacturing. From a pure economic logic standpoint, it is not in Europe's interest to decouple from Russian energy, but it is in the US interest to force that decoupling, because the higher costs force the relocation of industry from Europe to America. There is increased dependency on American LNG and Middle Eastern intermediaries aligned with Washington. And, like Trump says to the EU, you're going to invest billions, hundreds of billions in our economy. And Ursula von der Leyen says, yes, sir. Or sorry, they don't just say, yes, sir. What was the Mark Rutte, NATO chief? He says, yes, Daddy Trump. I mean, this is how depraved and subordinate Europe is to the US empire. It's truly sickening.
Yeah, I mean it is what it is. I mean the thing is that the Trump policy is like since he's gained office, and we said that this was going to happen. He's going to have a rubber stamp. Like basically, he has the House, he has the Senate, he has the courts, the Supreme Court. So really, the only people that are in opposition of him or in his way are in the local, basically like the local or traditional, like regional courts. That's about it, and like state level. And you saw what he just did. He basically declared a state of emergency, and I think it was a DC or New York. I think it was New York, right? Or was it DC?
Washington D.C. He's I think he's signed into power for the long-term federalization of DC police. Just DC right now, but we'll see how things go. And basically DC, like Democrat-run cities and megapolises, although there may be lots of wealth there, on a ground level, I'm not no expert, but it looks like shit, with homeless, crime, and whatever other problems they have.
Yeah, and I mean, I had said this was probably going to happen, is eventually they're going to federalize the police department. We went over that in the previous podcast with the prison industrial complex. That I said eventually the federal government under Trump was going to federalize the government or federalize the police force, and basically he's done it. So that's predictions that we basically made that came true. And at this point, it's just like whatever. I mean, there's just so much stuff going on in the world, and we're in crazy times. And I said 2025 would be very uncertain. Hashtag collapse 2025. We would definitely see like turmoil and political instability and border and regional conflicts that were going to arise in the later part of 2025, and that's what we're seeing now. So I mean, it is what it is. It's like it's. I called it, more or less.
There's another story I read that Trump's Pentagon plans to create a domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force with hundreds of National Guard troops to swiftly deploy to US cities during protests or civil unrest. Maybe sounds like an idea, but I don't really know the politics of that. But it's a CIA National Guard task force to be deployed nationwide, as and when. Hundreds, not hundreds. So it's not the military, it's the National Guard, but certainly intention, plan. I don't know if we've still got Professor here. I guess not. Okay, let's switch a bit to artificial intelligence. We all know that artificial intelligence isn't economic, right? It's security. It's why all the big investment into artificial intelligence is being government-led. To be clear, of course, there is enormous private investment into artificial intelligence. However, it's mostly for applications of artificial intelligence. The intelligence itself is being government-developed predominantly. And large-scale AI training and deployment is energy-intensive. So without cheap, reliable energy, AI development timelines slip and becomes more expensive and therefore more burdensome to the state. Whoever controls the input costs for AI compute effectively, for AI to effectively controls the pace of AI advancement. This is one of the reasons why Russia is framed as this enemy. Just at a glance, Russia is the largest natural gas reserves in the world, top 3 in oil production. America's number 1, but they use a lot of that energy and then export the LNG. Whereas Russia, they use of the energy, but they've got lots left over. It's cheaper for energy in Russia, and they export it. They're also dominant in uranium enrichment for nuclear fuels. And nuclear fuels and otherwise, these are vital for baseload stability in grids, especially those that run AI data centers. The other thing is that Russia have the strategic minerals for electronics and batteries. Remember mineral rights in the Ukraine? Well, Russia have them. And if Russia don't, like there's lots of rare earth processing that is not done in Russia or America, but China. This was one of the Trump's economic trade war with China didn't work. So they said, okay, you can impose sanctions and tariffs. We're going to, in turn, refuse to export you rare earth minerals or rare earth products. And the refinement of rare earths is very pollutant. Like you can't avoid it. And this is why it's done in China, and it's why it's very difficult to do that here in the West. It's very polluting.
Sorry about that. I lost connection. Yeah, because I'm mobile right now, so no worries. So where were you at?
We're talking about how AI is not economic but security, and how the importance of energy there, and how Russia have lots of natural resources, and what Russia don't have, China have in rare earth minerals and processing. So this Russia-China axis is a very powerful pole, an adversary, a rival to US power. Now, before this podcast, Professor, we're talking about the kind of this China, Russia, and USA triangle. And I was saying that I believe that the United States is a less natural partner than China for Russia in the current configuration. Not because of culture or economics or logistics, but because Washington actively maintains Russia as a strategic antagonist. If Washington wanted, Russia US could be the energy AI axis, but it is deliberately not allowed. And this is to do with a kind of a Mearsheimer style logic and economics, a latent threat doctrine, where any great power with independent resource industry and civilization is seen as a potential threat. And then you have to act on that latent threat, which is this strategic mindset that they are inherently a threat, even if relations are currently friendly. This is John Mearsheimer's tragedy of great power politics. The outcome is that capability matters more than stated intent. That if a state could threaten you in 20 or 30 years, it is safer to limit its rise now. This is why America is happy to fight to the last Ukrainian, because they've killed 120,000 Russians at least. More damaging Russia, not damaging the US. Yeah, it's costing some money, but they've got money. They don't, right? This is what we're talking about economically. And yes, it's devastated Ukraine and also Europe economically, but Europe and Ukraine are not America. This is not America's interest, but I don't think it is in their interest. I think that having framed Russia as a future rival, after 1992, that 10-year period, Russia said, first off, they had to recover, but by 2000, they said, let's be partners. And America laughed at them. They laughed at them. They said, no. In fact, we're going to continue preemptive containment and treat you as this declared rival, a structural adversary. And they imposed these containment measures, and this has forced Russia into building parallel systems and alliances, transforming it from a potential rival into this declared adversary. Basically, by treating them as a threat, it's caused them to behave in ways that's confirmed this threat narrative. So finally, after years of containment moves, sanctions, NATO encroachment, and narrative framing, Russia has become an actual rival, and not just in markets, but opposing US strategy in every major arena, in energy markets, in military alliances, in the current war, in technology standards, alternative financial systems, and ideological legitimacy. Washington treats Russia not through economics, where wealth increases through trade, but as a zero sum, where gains for one side are seen as loss for the other, where losses to Russia mean a gain to America, even though everything else. And this leads us back onto energy and Georgia. And if there's anything you'd like to add there, Professor?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm in the Tbilisi Mall right now in Tbilisi City Center, and like I said, you can see there's a lot of shopping going on. There's a lot of commerce. I do see a lot of international people. There are a lot of travelers, a lot of tourists. So there is still a lot of like, obviously, there is a lot of money moving around in this region in the South Caucasus, and so there is still commerce. Um, but what I'm told is like Russia right now is that like their inflation is double digits, and they've just lowered their interest rates in order to fight these interest rates. So the Russian economy is not doing really good right now, apparently.
Okay. As I say, there is a clear economic incentive to end war, and war is destructive. It's a common anarcho-capitalist analysis that if wars were fought by those who had to pay for them, it would be so destructive that no one would go to war. But don't pay for them. You pay for these war taxes, and you get rich off of it. So this is why they go to war, because it's it's coerced, it's taxed, it's not voluntary by anyone other than the states, than states in general. So, but listen, there is a war, and we've seen the West, this Western bloc, is not just trying to strategically defeat Russia, as that is their what they say, but this is an existential conflict for Russia. So, and I think this is well understood by Putin. He's a very, very man, clever, very well resourced. Russia is a rival power, a rival pole. It is a pole of power in a multipolar order, not a subordinate node. What this means is, economically, they may do better to end the war tomorrow, but is that the long-term interest? And this war against them has been waged for 30 plus years now. Oh, you can argue since the Cold War, but that's the Soviet Union. There's inheritance there, and indeed there is certainly inheritance there, but against the Russians and not the Soviet Union. That's been going on for 30 years. So I just don't see Russia making fundamental concessions on existential security matters. So maybe the economy is not doing so well. And I agree with the statistics that Professor has cited. Inflation, last I checked, was around double digits. Apparently, they've lowered the inflation rate. Sorry, they've lowered the interest rate to fight.
Yeah,
inflation.
they just lowered the interest rate. Yeah,
to me, but
that's standard.
But then that's not
central
to fight
bank.
the inflation, but to make it. Well, what they tend to do is raise the interest rate to fight inflation.
Yeah, generally when they raise the interest rate, they try to
stimulate investment.
No, I'm just saying, like they usually lower interest rates. Like central banks usually lower interest rates in order to stimulate the economy, but also they sometimes use it to fight inflation. Or no, they actually increase the interest rate to fight inflation. They lower the interest rate in order to stimulate the economy. So it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't make any sense, because it's like, well, if your inflation is double digits and you're lowering the interest rate, all you're going to do is just push inflation even higher. And the thing is even if they're able to come to any type of peace deal and regain trade between the West and Russia, what's going to happen when they have to pay those loans back for the war bonds? For the war they just ensued for the last 2.5 years. That's going to come due. So that's going to increase inflation. It's going to cause a lot of economic turmoil, not only in Russia, but for the entire region, as well as for Asia as well, for China, or anybody that's trading with Russia at this point. So it's going to definitely affect, Georgia. It's going to definitely affect, it's going to affect Turkey. It's going to affect Europe. It's going to affect Asia. I mean, it's going to affect, you're going to feel it. Like, you're going to feel it in the global economy. Even when this war ends, you're going to feel it, and you're
Sorry,
going to feel it.
what is it?
Go ahead.
What is it that you're going to feel?
You're going to feel the war,
What
the
is it
ending
that
of the
you're
war,
going to
because
feel?
you're going to feel the economics. You're going to feel the economics of the war because those bonds got to be paid back from the west side as well as from the east. So from Russian side, you're going to feel it. From the Western, economies, especially in Europe, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel the economic impact of that war. You see, when wars are going on, they're being financed, and they're being, they're putting interest on the loans, and they're furloughing the payments and furloughing the economic output because there's concessions, and there's territory, and there's certain types of commodities that can be gained from this. And governments will borrow against their central banks. Central banks borrow, whatever, it is what it is. So they're borrowing to pay for this conflict. If there's a saying, Ron Paul would say it all the time, that like basically if you got rid of the central banks, there'd be no more wars because the countries could no longer borrow in order to go fight conflicts. So in order for Russia, in order for the United States, in order for Ukraine to go fight a conflict, they have to get financing, and that financing is coming from central banks. It's coming from the United States Treasury. It's coming from European treasuries, from the German Treasury, from the UK Treasury. It's coming from the Russian Treasury. These conflicts have to be funded. These are bankers' wars. So when this war is over, that's when those bills come due. It's like you go and you eat an all-you-can-eat buffet, and at the end of the night, it's like, here's your bill. You got to pay it. So who's going to pay that? You, the taxpayer, the consumer. You guys are going to pay it. The average Joe. You're going to pay. You're going to pay the consequences of this long, laid out conflict, and it's going to affect the economy on a global scale, and it's going to affect the regional economy most effectively. So it is what it is.
Yes, this is true. Again, this is economics. Russia economically, it's suffered a lot throughout its history. I mean, under the Soviet Union, tens of millions of Russians and Soviets, not just Russians, tens of millions of Soviets were killed. Economically, they suffered as well, definitely. But when it comes to security, this is something you sacrifice economics for. When it comes to, and they're in the war now, they've been fighting the war. Again, let's call it 120,000 Russians more, 120,000 Russians dead, over 1 million Ukrainians dead. And you have to remember, if this was 50 years ago, I'd be saying, 1.5 million Soviets have died because they're all one people. The Russians and Ukrainians and Belarusians, they're all the same people. They're just under different gangs or administrations. So this is a great tragedy, but it's a tragedy that Russia has said, we have to fight this because this isn't a war we've chosen. It's a war you've imposed, you've manufactured, you've compelled us into this situation. So it's not economics, it's security. And so I think that the strategic, necessary calculus is the economy may be suffering right now, and it is. It's probably worth the while. And indeed, if Russia are able to have recognized the territory they've seized, I think that's what, $10 trillion in wealth gained. Many people, land, for the best agricultural and industrial land. So even if you've spent $250 million, $250 billion fighting this war, if the land that you gain is worth $10 trillion, that's a 40 times return on investment. The financing cost might be quite high. There's problems, but I still think it's probably the I don't think that the economics it adds pressure, but I don't think it's going to or will lead to a fundamental existential concession by the Russian Federation.
I don't think there would be necessarily concessions, but there at least is going to be some type of peace deal. And I think it's more so that Ukraine is done. It's not so much that Russia wants it to end. I think it's just that Ukraine is done. And I think Trump is trying to mitigate as much lost territory in the situation as he can to prevent a complete and total collapse of the Ukrainian economy and the Ukrainian country as we know it. Um, and also, this is going to affect the European Union, and it's going to affect the region most heavily. It's not right now. Like I said, you guys can see that I am literally in the mall in Tbilisi, and there are people shopping everywhere. And this is in the summer where most people are like outside of the city on vacation and stuff. But there are people shopping. It's nearly 10 o'clock at night, um, and there are people shopping everywhere. So you can tell the economy is definitely still stimulated here. There still is economic activity. So I mean, it is what it is. But at the same time, it's like, what's going to happen? You know, is the economy going to crash? Is the global economy going to tank? You know, is this, you know, because like I said, when this war is over, like I said, the bill's going to come due, and everybody's going to have to pay it. You know, the average taxpayer, the anybody that has a vested interest in any type of trade with Russia and in the region is going to be ultimately affected. Just economics on the situation. Since COVID, the economy here, inflation is through the roof. I mean, it technically it's at 1 to 2% right now, which is actually pretty good. That's solid inflation rate. But like the prices have pretty much doubled since 2000 and I believe 2020. But there is some mitigative factors involved in that, and the main thing is that this is a growing economy. This is a very fast growing economy, and you know the standard of living has definitely gotten much. The standard of living has definitely gone up. The HDI is very high. There is a lot of growth. There is a lot of economic stimulation, a lot of building, a lot of real estate that's going up left and right. There is infrastructure projects. I mean, the economy is booming. But for how long? That's the thing. And a lot of this money that's been coming in recently during the last 2 to 3 years has been coming from Russia. It's been coming in from China. It's been coming in from European Union. It's been coming in from Arabia, and it's going to stop. And when it stops, what is that going to happen? What's going to happen to the economy here locally? I don't know. There is some uncertainties. There is questions that need to be asked. But I do know that the region right now, there is slowdown. There are Russians leaving Georgia right now. There are Russians that are staying. But the reality is how long is this economic juggernaut or this economic prosperity going to continue in the region? We don't know. It is what it is.
Just a thumbs up or down. Are you saying the economy is good right now in Georgia and prosperous, or that rate of prosperity may slow down or change wind when the war is over? Or are you saying when the war is over, maybe things get even better? You're saying when the war's over,
No,
the cost of the war will come to bear, and that will tank the economy, or it's peace breaks out and standards and conditions improve.
I think that the economy it is slowing down in Georgia, most definitely slowing down. Even the government officially has said that it's slowing down. I think with the peace deal in Russia, the economy is going to slow down even faster because that money is going to leave Georgia and it's going to go to Ukraine for rebuilding. I think the investment is going to be pulled. Like you said, dude, this is a project right now. I showed you guys a previous project that's going up right now. This is a huge investment project that investors, real estate. I don't know how many units are in this particular like obviously it's a complex of buildings. This is a project that's being developed right now. This is one of maybe hundreds in the country. So yeah, that being said, I mean it's literally the economy's slowing down. You people can feel it. It is what it is. Um, a Russia conflict ending would mean that Russians would leave in droves. Ukrainians would leave in droves. They would go back to Ukraine, go back to Russia. Economic investments would be pulled from the country and be diverted to Ukraine, especially from the Middle East. Especially any investments in the region will be diverted to Ukraine because that's where the biggest ROI will be in. So, could you imagine a country roughly the size of the state of Texas is completely destroyed and devastated. And all of a sudden, BlackRock, who's got a heavy interest and heavy investment in Ukraine, as well as Russia's stake in Ukraine, one of the largest economies in the region, decides that, okay, the war's over, let's rebuild a destroyed country that they got to build up from the ground up. Could you imagine that? Like, what's going to happen? Like, investors are going to be pouring into that investment. You know what I mean? People are going to be like, there's going to be people as far as like China and Beijing. Like, how can I get in? How can I get on this? You know what I mean? Here's another project for you guys to see. That this is another project that's in development. This is 3 that I've showed you guys already. These are huge projects too. This is one of like hundreds that are in the country right now. So what's going to happen to these? Are they just going to stop building them halfway through? That's what happened in '08 during the Ossetia conflict. A lot of the projects that they started building, they literally just stopped building them. They just emptied and abandoned buildings across the country. And we're talking about the difference between '08 and 2025 is it's 100 times the amount of investment, foreign investment in building projects than what we saw in '08. So there's buildings going up all over the country. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of projects ongoing right now as we speak. What's going to happen if this conflict ends is the money is going to flow out of the country. The investments are going to go to Ukraine because, you could make a regular investment in Ukraine of like $100,000. You could probably turn that into $1 million in less than 5 to 10 years. I mean, that kind of ROI. You're not going to see that in Georgia. You're not going to see that in Dubai, United States, any other country. But in Ukraine, you can. And the money's going to be flowing in. There's going to be lots of jobs. People are going to be flowing there. And that's what I think is going to end up happening. And this is in concurrence with many, economists and academics like myself. We're all pretty much saying, yeah, this is what's going to happen. Marketing experts, business experts, economists, in the region, they're like, yeah, this war ends, and then it will affect the Georgian economy. Money will flow out of this country, most definitely.
Ukraine is currently the poorest corner of Europe, the poorest. Trump had a name for these kind of countries: poorest shithole country of Europe. Like the poorest. I think like $3,500 gross national income per person, something like that.
Yeah,
the lowest in Europe. And what's tragic is 35 years ago, Ukraine was like the richest area in the Soviet Union, other than Moscow, perhaps. But as that's the capital, which a vortex for capital and wealth and power. But Ukraine was like one of the richest oblast regions of the Soviet Union. Really tragic, and it's a tragedy brought on by American policy interests. And again, it comes down to this conception. Let's frame Russia. Russia may be a future rival, so we're going to frame them as a latent threat, and this justifies containment. We're going to apply that: NATO expansion, sanctions, tech and finance exclusion, and as and when Russia responds, particularly when you coup d'etat the democratically elected government in Kiev in 2014, and install a hostile vassal puppet right on the border, and then try and get them into your military bloc, that necessarily warrants a response, a reaction. And Putin says, my biggest regret is that I pushed for peace and peace and peace with these perfidious warmongers who never had any interest in peace, but their interest was, we want to strategically defeat, to plunder, and our word, the Russian Federation and Russia. So the irony is that this economic warfare has forced Russia to build alternative systems, deepen ties with non-Western partners, and kind of displace Western competition. And it comes down to the profile of Russia. It has vast resources, especially energy resources, oil, gas, uranium. It has military self-sufficiency and the nuclear deterrent. It has an independent technology and scientific base. It has a distinct civilizational identity that resists US-style integration, because it is itself a civilization with its own historical, cultural, and spiritual continuity, much like China or India, or indeed the United States as a civilization. The EU used to be, prior to 1940, used to be its own civilization. It did not have these vast resources, however. As a civilization, Russia, China, India, Iran, America, they have independent moral political legitimacy. So they don't see Western liberal democracy as the only valid model in the case of Russia. It has a unique historical narrative that emphasizes resistance to foreign domination, and now even perhaps the preservation of Orthodox Russia. They have strategic autonomy. Russia believes that it should set its own rules, alliances, and development path. And my hope, we shall see, my hope is the rules that they try to follow is international law and multipolarity and sovereignty of countries. And US-style integration means this post-Cold War Washington consensus. Economic openness to American-led capital flows, political alignment with liberal democracy, and security integration under NATO and Western military structures, which are aggressive by nature. And again, Russia has acted as historically and today as a pole of power in the multipolar order, not a subordinate node. The reason for the state of affairs as today is that from a latent threat perspective, even if Russia is friendly, and we invited them in, our partners in the early 2000s, it could one day rival US power or Eurasia, as indeed it did when it were the USSR, the Soviet Union. So the question is, empirically, the US think tanks, or the government, saw preemptive containment as safer than trusting in perpetual goodwill. They've now put their cards on the table. They've gambled, went to war against Russia. They've lost. So the question is, will they continue to fight, or will they accept the reality, accept that they've lost this war and conflict, and come to a rational exit? Perhaps peace and coexistence, rather than we want to defeat Russia. If you have peace and coexistence, and if Washington allows peace and coexistence, I think, yes, there's damages from the war. I think if Washington allows peace and coexistence, maybe you can have this new age of peace and prosperity. Maybe not, hasn't happened so far. And the age of peace and prosperity, or whatever, certainly, we're halfway through this decade of digital transformation. Evidently, it is artificial intelligence that decides the future, certainly on a security state level. And what drives AI? Yes, you've got the intellectual capital base, but you've also got energy. I think that was just bringing it back to the topic of the episode.
For the most part, whoever controls energy is going to control AI. And right now, it seems like the United States is one of the key players in this right now. Russia definitely has the cards in order to take over, but they're having some technological issues due to manpower and technology, because they're diverting all of their resources to this war in Ukraine. That's what I'm saying. Like, once the war is over, Russia's going to be a major competitor with the United States in that regard, I think.
It already is. It is a major competitor. It is a rival. But I don't know enough about Russia AI exactly, but do know I don't think it's as good as American. Otherwise, I'd probably use it. So they are certainly a competitor and a rival castle like China. But I would agree that, at least from a consumer use case, American intelligence on the AI question is ahead. And part of it is that you talk about the inflation in Russia. It's not just, oh, there's a war, inflation. It's like, well, there's a war, so the Russian government is spending tons of money on the war, military spending at a war level. So, and then you have to focus on people focusing on the systematic death destruction of the enemy, the Ukrainian armed forces, as opposed to building wealth. So when the war's over, it's going to end, Russia can reallocate its resources to building wealth. I just don't see, the war is won, just like, I can't remember the date, but before the Soviets fell on Berlin, the war was already won. There was just a lot of fighting left to go, and there's a fight to go. But I think if Washington, if America could concede to those fundamental issues, this is why Russia will say this is why this war began, for all of these reasons, and it's not just Ukraine. And when you listen to the Russian intellectuals, they say it's not just Ukraine, it's energy, it's Georgia, it's the Caucasus, it's Eastern Europe, it's the Middle East, it's all sorts of things. It's not just Ukraine, it's one piece, a major piece, but it's one piece in the puzzle. I think they do need a trade deal, but right now there's all the sanctions. Russia has been excluded and contained, or at least trying to, and Russia has in response built up these parallel systems, etc. So I'm hoping solution idea. What typically happens is not the leaders get together and they have out and they talk and they agree, and usually there's a lot of negotiation done beforehand, and it's all kind of said and done, and they meet, and there's maybe some very high level discussion, and they sign the paper. It's not really that they go and discuss these things. It ought to be discussed ahead of time. It hasn't really happened with the US. There's not any diplomacy, but Trump has secured a meeting with Putin in Alaska.
He secured
I hope for the best.
Yeah.
I think more just Ukraine. Yeah, it's a major win for Putin and Trump to be meeting, and I'm hopeful for it. But I do not believe the war will finish in August, unless Trump sends down the marching orders. We're done. No more weapons, and then it can be over within a month.
Yeah, it sounds like they're already starting to pull forces out of the front lines from Ukraine. That's why because Russia's taking massive amounts of territory, so it's very possible that Ukraine is already anticipating a ceasefire and a peace deal, so that they might be removing troops from the front lines. I don't know. I'm not there. I'm not like an expert on it, but that's what it sounds like. It sounds like they're on their last leg, basically.
So I'm also not an expert in the tactical execution of modern war, but I follow it, and I follow people who are pretty good analysts. And it's not so much Ukraine are like, all right, retreat, like let them take the territory, we shall protect our lives. No, they fight to the last Ukrainian, screams Zelensky. It's just that the Russian war machine making key breakthroughs, and they're in the war. And they've reached this the last highly defensive line and they're just been breaking through and forming the tactical maneuvering in order to make progress. There's been a lot of death, hundreds of thousands been killed.
It's been a long war, and like I said, there's COVID and the economic slowdown, oil prices like tanking, economic sanctions, tariffs to infinity and beyond, interest rates, staying afloat, and inflation through the floor, through the ceiling. It's something that's going to happen. I mean, it is what it is. After the regional conflicts that I've been predicting that have come to fruition. Like I said, we're coming on the hour, so let's go ahead and wrap it up because I'm at like 1% of my battery on my phone.
Okay. Nothing more to add. Follow us on Telegram, Locals, YouTube, Twitch, Substack. Hope you've learned a lot about AI, energy, geopolitics.
All right. Good night, guys. Take care.